Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We've got two wonderful artists that I want to introduce. I think you possibly know, Mika Rottenberg and John Kessler. And we're going to talk a little about introduce Performa to you, which is a biennial that runs in New York. And we've just come from running the big biennial in New York. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that and then actually let John and Mika tell you about their project. Some of you here are familiar with Performa. It's a biennial that I started in 2005. I woke up one day and decided New York needs a real biennial. A very unusual biennial that would start out with all commissions and would involve visual artists, many of whom have not done live performance before, but to really inspire them to find ways to actually create live events. What was my plan? Some of you might know I've been writing the last 3 decades the history of artist performance. And some of you will call it performance art. Maybe I don't actually use that term very much, because what I've been trying to explain all these years in my writing is the fact that artists have always done live performance. It might come as a surprise to you, even Leonardo da Vinci did live performances. Maybe we just used another name. Throughout the 20th century, there's been the surrealists doing live events, doing poetry, the Russian constructivists doing live events, the artists designing events to actually talk to a large public and reach the public through very avant-garde ideas of art. So throughout this idea throughout the 20th century, as I say, there's this marvelous history. Some of you know about happenings. There's a wonderful history of artists making live events. And what I've been doing in my writing over the years is really connecting the dots and saying, you know, this has actually been critical to shaping the history of art. Even a lot of the work out here that you see, I could probably take you down each hall and really give you some sense of the performance history that created works. Works, for example, by Cindy Sherman, where she really started out doing live performances. They were private performances, herself dressing up and then photographing them. But this again comes from a performance history. So my idea to start Performa was to create a biennial that really went very public with this idea of the history. And the other idea was to commission new work. Which also makes it very exciting, because it was the proposal to the artist was, what would you like to do? Give me you know, let's respond to this idea of live, and how will you go with that? Each year we create a new logo as well. So this was our logo for 2011, which just finished 2 weeks ago. And just to give you some idea of some of the projects that we started with, our opening night was a work by Elmgreen and Dragset. Sorry about the naked legs. That's actually Joseph Fiennes, who dropped his pants in the middle of the story. It's a work that I commissioned from Elmgreen and Dragset, who also have an installation here today. And the proposal to them was also to really think about the relationship between theater as we know theater and the art performance as we know it within the art context. And they decided to create actually a very, in a way, using the entire model of the theater, using a Beckett play, Happy Days, and really talking about their lives as artists. And so it was it was a full-length theatrical work with 2 major actors, Joseph Fiennes playing one of the artists and Charles Edwards playing the other. And the conversation throughout the play was ironic and funny and very touching, and in some senses disturbing, about their relationship and what it takes to be a creative artist. This was the later the evening went on, and was one of their early works. We did an entire retrospective of their performances. It's actually a piece about paparazzi. So whoever came into the party that night was bombarded by these photographers, and I was, again, part of their retrospective of the kinds of works they were doing. Where are we? So these were all from the first night with Elmgreen and Dragset. And then, so I just wanted to give you a sense of, again, the range of projects we've had. Another artist that we worked with this year was Simon Fujiwara, who did a very sort of interesting self-portrait in a sense, as this was another self-portrait. And the theme this year was really starting with this idea of language and translation and the different concepts of different ways in which artists use language. So that's just as a really brief beginning to some of the ideas that shape each performer, and I'm really happy to be able to answer some of those questions when we get to them. But I wanted to really move right into the project that Mika and John did. And to give you a little background of the history, some of you, I'm sure, know Mika's work, which is always this extraordinarily imaginative approach to storytelling, sometimes very abstract in a sense, but always somehow you just get totally seduced by the world that she creates. Some of you might have seen a piece that she had at the Whitney Biennial a couple of years ago. What was the farm piece with all the hair?
Cheese.
Cheese. It was called Cheese. It had people, lots of women.
With long hair.
With very long hair, down to the ground. And again, why did I approach her to do a work like that? I just felt in looking at her pieces that they seemed to be like contemporary fairy tales. I couldn't understand them, and yet they were magical. I was drawn to them. It's like reading, you know, the story of any of the Grimm's fairy tales. You don't really understand what is Billy Goat Gruff doing on the bridge if somebody's going to jump out and bite him. But somehow there's this magical quality. And in looking at Mika's work, I felt that she had all these qualities that I really wanted to see what would happen if she came to life, if she could bring those projects to life. So with that introduction to her, I spoke to her about a year ago, maybe a bit more actually. She was working on her last film and really planted the seed and said, would you start thinking about how you might approach your work as a live project? And so slowly over the year, she would come in from time to time and we'd have coffee and describe some of the ways she wanted to approach this project. And somewhere along the way, she also had this brilliant idea. She said, you know, I think it would be fantastic if I could take this idea and actually work with John Kessler, who, not to go into too much background, but was actually her professor at Columbia when she was a student there. And somehow the two of them coming together just really clicked in this really intriguing way. So I'm going to really hand it to them to tell you about what that was like to work together, how Mika approached John. I don't know what you said to him, what you sparked in his mind that said, yes, we can work together. And also to collaborate is pretty difficult when you have two monumental imaginations at work. And I think that was also an extraordinary thing for all of us to stand back and watch, because to put two artists together in that way, or you approached him, these are all the things I want to hear you talk about. So over to you.
Yeah. You first. Well, Mika showed her work at Columbia last year, and I was looking at all the work in total, and I just realized how many points of similar interest that we have in our work. And I actually, I asked Mika I said, you know, we should really collaborate someday. And she'd already been talking to RoseLee about Performa, and she was hesitant to start on a large project, and so she said, why don't we have coffee? And I think we got together very shortly after that and started to, in a very, very sort of loose, abstract way, talk about you know, collaborating on a piece. And the ideas that we initially talked about have nothing to do with what we eventually did, and that's the beauty of you know, making art and the meanderings and the trips and cul-de-sacs and forks in the road that it all takes. But slowly the piece started to come together, and it actually turned into a very, very, very large project, much bigger than Mika had probably imagined at the beginning. But let's just talk about the project, I guess, because they,
yeah.
you know.
What did you tell him that you wanted to do?
Well, we talked about doing something in a cruise ship or something.
Cruise ship. It was the original idea.
Yeah, I think I knew I wanted it to involve travel of sorts, and
yeah.
And I was interested in using the platform of Performa to do a more experimental piece, and not kind of to be trapped in my own thinking. And I was really interested in just bringing in a whole other kind of element to it, and maybe just extending all these things that are already in my work, which are the performative aspect and the sculptural aspect. And I thought if I could do it with another artist, maybe we could kind of both expand these things. And it was kind of a perfect match, I think, because it was very clear why we were going to do it together and what are the elements and
So the missing element in both of our works was the live performance. So Mika makes these brilliant video installations where, you know, the performance has already happened in a sense, where it's already been filmed, and I make these video installations which are live. There's no recording that happens. There's no no DVD player, no recording device. They're live surveillance type installations. So the one missing element that sort of married the work in this piece was the live performance.
And I think that this kind of storytelling that's more about the way materials behave or things go. I mean, I think your work has this kind of narrative that's not, it's very kind of real-time based. It's not illusionary in any sense. And I think that that's a live element, but you never have live people. So
that's right.
I think that was a big connection. But we were talking and talking forever about different things, and I think that this piece started from wanting to make a rainbow from sweat. And it ended up being, we kind of forgot about the rainbow, I think. And the sweat really wasn't really sweat. Basically, the piece circles around this chakra juicer, which is a device to extract chakra, which are the 7 kind of energetic points in the body, to extract, basically juice people's chakras into a test tube. You could see one of them made. That's how the chakra juice is extracted.
People go into a sauna, and there's a cyclist who's cycling inside the sauna. There's a potter's wheel, which is slowly spinning around, and there's a 90-degree humid sauna where they're sweating, and their sweat is collected and then fed through. It gets pumped into a vessel, and then it gets put into this laboratory through alchemical processes, gets made into chakra juice. But you've probably all done that in your life, so we don't really need to.
Can I just pause here to ask you again that question? Because actually, when Mika first proposed this, and we both, you know, I was trying to understand what she was talking about. She did come up right then with the chakra juices, and I'm going, okay, and didn't really understand it. So, I mean, what I'm getting to this next moment is the division of labor, because then you seem to come in and provide a kind of a sculpture, or I mean, I'm trying to understand again how that idea.
The idea of the chakras was something we came together. I think the initial thing is something that I thought a long time ago about this machine to make sweat, a rainbow out of someone's sweat. And I kind of told that to John after we were a little bit, I mean, we had all these ideas and it was kind of all over, and then we're like, okay, let's just start with that. And then we started talking about the RGB, or like what you have a lot in your work, the way video breaks and creates all these colors. So then we started talking about colors and about, I forgot what, I think it was in my living room, we were just talking, and then somehow the chakra thing came. I'm not exactly sure.
It was very intuitive, very organic. It was like a house of cards where Mika would throw something out and I would react to it. I would throw something out, she would react to it. And it just things got stacked and stacked, and then at one point, it got really complicated, this piece. It got, like, we had the live time element, and it was a little bit like being John Malkovich, where you're so deep inside this thing that you can't, you actually don't even understand what you're doing anymore. And that's when it got, like, then we started to actually maybe like sort of pull out some parts
reduce it. At this point, I was in Africa, I was in South Africa, or in Botswana, and I also knew I wanted to go to Africa.
Well, let me just tell the Africa story a little bit too. I mean, I'm trying to get them to really describe this piece to you. It's like you have to envision it. And what you're looking at here, I mean, actually walking into the space in Chelsea, when you walked into the space, it was like you'd stumbled into some mad scientist's laboratory. And so there's this whole machine going back and forth between Africa. But Mika had just come back from, her earlier film was actually based on a project she did in India. And so she was sitting in my office one day saying she really wanted to go to Africa. And while she was talking, I managed to email a friend who had this residency in an area, a very beautiful area outside Johannesburg called the Cradle of Mankind. So within 10 days, she was off to Africa, like a dream come true. First in South Africa in this very beautiful landscape, and then in Botswana, she went on a second trip.
Yeah, so at that point, we have already talked about sending the chakra juice somewhere far. And Botswana seemed very far. So we're like, let's just send it there. So then I talked to RoseLee, and 10 days after I was in South Africa, which is not Botswana. Yeah. But that was kind of an option. I didn't quite find what I wanted there, and I got a car and I drove to Botswana. And I think circled Botswana around a few times and didn't find what I was looking for, which was the typical African landscape, which doesn't really exist. And I just discovered a lot of bush and some zebras, but not. I think at this point we were looking for, because John in his work has all these postcards imagery, and I was looking for what you think about like a postcard of Africa.
Yeah. Somewhat cliche.
Yeah, and that didn't really exist. So I remember Skyping, and I was like, I can't find it. It's not there. But what I did find was the emptiness, like this amazing dry lake, which is just flat, goes on forever. It looks like the moon. It's like white, cracked sand. An amazing little cattle post, like a little village with maybe 15 people living there with no electricity, with these huts. And they're really nice and friendly, and I found some really great actors there. So I decided that that's where we're gonna do it, and I told John, okay, is that gonna work? And we're trying to think about how we can bring animals to it, because that was kind of different than the original idea. And then we're like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, and then I came back, right?
Then you came back. Well, then you came back, and then we started to actually build the props that you were going to bring for the shoot, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because what happens in the piece, maybe we already described it, but just to have it, there's the sauna, the chakra juicer that extracts the chakra. The 7 sweaters, basically 7 people that sit in a waiting room, each in its turn goes into the sauna. In the chakra juicer, they go there for about 10 minutes. Their body fluids are collected, go kind of distilled through the lab and turned into a test tube with one of the 7 colors. After about 40 minutes, they've collected 7 colors. They're all put in kind of like an aromatic mail kind of tube, and that gets sent through the gallery in Chelsea, through Nicole Klaxman Gallery, to the middle of this cattle post, or the middle of this ancient bed lake in Botswana. And that gets poured into a hole in the ground, and then there's like this big explosion with rainbow and birds and fountain, 7-color fountain. And
so things are being sent back and forth in real time in this video. So it was, we had to cue this entire thing really, like it had to be sharp. You know, someone puts something into a tube in New York, and it's got to come out in Africa, right? And then they put something in Africa.
And the core samples, right? At the same time, there's a video, so there's a live performance at the space, which shows how the chakra juice gets extracted, and also those there's core samples that's sent from the African soil to the gallery, and those are used in the chemical process to create the color.
Everything is used in the piece. So that was one of the logics that we were sort of like, okay, there's not going to be this extraneous aspect, which is just cool. You know, we really wanted everything to actually sort of have a meaning and a use value in this piece, and it does. You know, and it's sort of, and that's where we would keep. Sometimes we would really sort of like circle around something, and it's like, well, how are we going to use this? And well, we can use that if we then crush it, and then it gets sent. And it was like, it was really. I have to say, you know, we went down the rabbit hole a bunch of times on this project, and you know, it was incredibly rewarding to see something that's one of the things that strikes me about Mika's work and my work is that it's both It's incredibly populist, but smart, and political or edgy, or it has this sort of, it's not theory driven, but it has strong ideas behind it, but it's populist. It's not, I would not say, I mean, yes, the work is entertaining, and we knew that we did not want to make a piece where people would sort of engage, like sort of not understand, or like, what's happening here? They'd walk out scratching their head. We really wanted this piece to sort of be very understandable, and on many different levels.
Can you talk about the politics? You said, for example.
Sure. I mean, part of those, can be, when you talk about politics, some of those are, politically correct, and some of them are politically incorrect. I mean, there were people talking about the sort of sort of colonial aspect of sending goodwill to Africa. So that was sort of like, sort of a subtext for the work. There's also the whole idea of the sort of the fetish of new ageness that we all sort of have, always constantly balancing our bodies with coffee or meds or antidepressives, or it's like that constant sort of chemical balance that you're kind of always trying to find in your life. So there's that. There's the sort of the commodity of the chakra that we're creating as artworks, or the core samples, the production of those. Am I catching all these little? Yeah.
What? Yeah. I mean, I think I was interested in. Botswana is one of the biggest diamond exporter, so kind of reverse the sending back and forth. So in a way, like, you extract something from the bodies in New York and you send it to Africa, and you send from Africa a piece of soil back to New York, and this kind of exchange back and forth thing of resources and energies between these two separate places.
And plus, we were commenting, I mean, again, it's like to comment on something doesn't necessarily mean that you're critical. You're just, you're pointing a finger at it, and we were even pointing a finger at the idea of performance.
Right.
I mean, Mika it's a brilliant moment in the piece where there is a crowd in Africa who are sitting there and then clapping, and the audience in New York is looking at this crowd. There's eye contact, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is like, what's the point, in a way? Like, you're doing this whole insane action to create this beautiful moment. And I think on that we got stuck a lot, because it was obvious to us that we want kind of a payoff, like this climax moment, right? That you kind of see this sweat getting collected and collected and collected and being sent there, and then there's going to be like this big explosion, and it needs to be the most beautiful thing ever made. And we were both talking for about like 6 months about what's like the most beautiful thing ever made. And
we realized we didn't have the budget for that.
Yeah.
And Steven Spielberg's not my uncle, so that wasn't going to happen.
We're actually going to create a 7-color fountain and pyrotechnics and colored smoke and all that in the middle of the desert, which I kind of felt uncomfortable with.
So get back though to how do you work? Mm-hmm. Like, you came up with this idea. Where do you begin your thinking? Africa. Okay, you want to go to Africa. Off you go to Africa. But are you somebody who does the research? Do you? Why you suddenly pop up with Africa, and then what do you do? I mean, I guess I'm getting back to this idea, like, how do you work? How does John work? And then, were there any arguments? I mean, were there any days you just didn't talk to each other?
Well, that's hardly no, right?
No,
we didn't. I mean, it was pretty like kind of easy in that sense. But I mean,
do you think you work similarly though? Is there any correlation?
I think we work similarly in some ways, except that this was a very difficult piece for me in some ways, because I work, here's my life is, I work in my studio, I make my own stuff. I work for maybe a year, and then I have like a 2-week installation doing the piece. This was like a 3-month installation in a funny way. We kind of like
with live people.
With live people, and in my case, because I was making all the props and the installation and the sculptures, it would be like, oh, well, they can't get from here to there in 3 seconds, which would time it with the video. So we got to like make changes here, and it was just a constant. But I think we work similar in some ways. It's very intuitive. It's not, and it's like, do you ever have the entire thing in your mind before you I mean, it's right.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really about just spinning ideas and starting from a core, and almost like capturing it as like an energy or like a sound or something that I know that's what I want the piece to radiate, and then constantly trying to find that place and kind of like staying. That's what kind of guides me to stay focused, because I know there's some kind of a feeling or some kind of a thought, some kind of an energy that I want the piece to have.
Yeah.
And that's pretty clear, but I don't know how to get there. So it's kind of searching for that.
But I have to say, something I realized about the way you work is you're incredibly intuitive, and that you had, I mean, whether you stuck with it or not, you would often have, you know, you'd have a feeling about something like very quickly. It was, you know, it's
either it works or not. And I think it's because I know what I want it to be, what I want it to do. Yeah. It's like, it's very much, for me, I'm interested in what it activates in the viewer. So it's the piece is almost like a vehicle to kind of communicate or to create some kind of a feeling with the viewer, or in the kind of this dynamic in someone's brain or something. So that's very clear to me. So I guess the intuition is that going to do it or not? You know, is that kind of is going to... Yeah. And I think we both wanted the similar thing from the piece. Yeah. But I mean, generally, I did the video, John did the sculptures, and that's how. And then we really hope that it's going to connect.
Yeah. What we decided early on is and I think collaborations can happen many different ways. But what we decided early on, also because Mika was going to be going to Africa and I wasn't, was that we were going to create autonomous pockets of activity and workflow, and that we would consult with each other, but we have enough trust in each other's work that we're not going to design by committee, where things won't get watered down, and that's maybe one of the strengths of this piece, is that
and that was so much fun, just to know that like we talked about something, I can go do something, and then you're going to do something more amazing than what I even thought that it's going to be. You know, that was like such a gratifying.
Yeah.
Can I just have you each again answer this question? What happens? I mean, people often ask me, you commission somebody to do, artist who works in installation or video, who's never done something live before. So what did it do? What has it done to you? Having how differently did you work? And both of you to answer that question, how has it maybe changed the way you see your own work? Maybe both past and going forward. Like what happens when that live? I know what I want is that experience. I want to spend time with an artist's work. I don't want to just peer at the video or be in the installation. I actually want to have another kind of experience, which is what drives me to commission artists to make these live projects. Right. What did it do to both of you?
I mean, I think the biggest realization was how hard it is. It's harder to make something look authentic when it's actually authentic. It's a lot easier to create this authentic feeling when it's a video. So that was one realization, and then just how different it is to do that when you have such a limited area to manipulate, when it's whatever is happening, and it's really stressful because it's endless. It's not like you finish a piece and you press play and that's it. Like it's alive. So that was a really enjoyable part, but also
you said you liked the sort of terror of the experimentation.
Yeah, sure. That's what motivates me. But that it's endless, and I'm sure it's going to affect my work. I'm not sure how, but yeah.
Yeah, for me the biggest change was dealing with like people I don't know, and it kind of freaked me out when we had a casting call and lots of people came who knew there were that many people who wanted to sweat in public. But a lot of, there's a lot of out-of-work actors or people who want to break into showbiz, and so someone at the casting call, someone came up to me and sort of whispered in my ear that his dad also had a store in fashion in Getty Square in Yonkers, and I was like, how do you know that? Oh, I researched you, and he was sort of he wanted to get the part, and he was sort of like trying to butter me up, and I realized, whoa, this is really kind of creepy and strange to like deal with people, because I don't do that in my work. I just, make my work by myself. And so, but the fact is that, and that's, Mika really sort of has had so much more experience in the casting and dealing with people. And I found myself, because they were interacting with my machines, I don't make interactive art. You know, it's like there's no buttons to push. It just performs for you. It's performative, but it just happens. I found myself being a little bit gruff sometimes with the performers. It's like, no, you don't open it that way. This is the way you do it. And then Mika would come, like, pull me aside and say, John, just, you know, they're just getting the cues, you know, just
no,
give
I
them
really
some,
felt like you're like, they're like metals, the wood, they're now like, do this, how come they don't do that? And
yeah, I wasn't so good with the actors. But,
I mean, you were really nice,
yeah.
you're just wanting them to do, you're like,
yeah.
they're part of my sculpture, why don't they behave like my sculpture
exactly.
now? And it was like,
it all worked out. I learned how to deal with.
And then they had an amazing experience doing it. But
they want to follow the piece.
This is like the perfect couple. I mean, absolutely wonderful. I just wanted to say thank you. That was amazing. I don't know if anybody has questions. I mean, the great thing about you today is that you're having to use your imagination, because you probably have no idea what this is really going on. I don't know how many of you might have seen the piece in New York. Obviously, we are going to try to tour it and move it around to different places so people can have the experience, which was truly a wonderful experience. It was a great hit in New York. So 1 or 2 questions before we sign off. Yes?
What's that? Okay. What is it like to go through this transition of being professor and student to one where you now have a collaborative relationship? I mean, was this an adjustment, or was there already a dialogue that had existed between you post-student teacher that allowed for this to happen in a natural way, or was there this adjustment? The other question is, and I should know it because I'm a product of the 60s, what is chakra?
Well, John was the chair actually at Columbia when I was there, but he never really acted like the chair. It was an amazing chair. He completely like transformed the program, and I had the most amazing time there. But you're never like, you're always kind of part of the students.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It wasn't a hierarchical.
There was never felt, and
yeah.
I think that's the whole strength of Columbia. It doesn't feel like you're kind of treated like an artist from the beginning, and so that didn't feel like was like
but
a
we've
weird
also
transition.
remained close, you know, and Mika, during time, at certain points in her, in the development of other projects, I mean, especially I think about the Mary Squeeze, you asked me to come over, so we've stayed close, you know, and.
But you're like you go to all your students' openings until now. I think that's like how, I don't know how you keep track.
Not all my students.
Most of them.
Just the ones I liked.
And what is the chakra?
You know, everyone, and it's funny because I think we're both interested in it as like a cultural kind of reference, almost like a ready-made. I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean,
like
I meditate, I do yoga and all that, but it's an energetic point according to Hinduism. There's like 7 energetic points in the body. They all have a color and some kind of power assigned to them.
And they go from the top, the crown of the head, to your groin, but it's, to your
And you're supposed to have them balanced if you're perfect, but nobody's perfect, so the whole thing is about achieving some kind of balance in all of them. And there's
it's
like
also
a creative
like
chakra, there's whatever, there's all these.
You could also, it also comes in, it's like a jellied candy. You could buy it at Zabar's.
Yeah, that also.
Any other questions? We're okay? I just want to say we'll keep you posted. If you sign up, we'll make sure you're at the next place where this wonderful piece will travel to. So you can, now you've got the background and you're wondering what is going to happen, you'll actually be able to walk into the room and know exactly what a chakra is. And maybe you'll even offer yourself to sit and sweat.
RoseLee, could I
like
just say one thing before
yes,
we
please.
sign off? I just want to thank RoseLee Goldberg, because RoseLee's vision for having artists get out of their comfort zone is really what created this piece. And it never would have happened without, the commission. It wouldn't have happened without, and RoseLee came to the studio and she just said, keep going, go further.
Make it bigger, make it bigger. I don't know how,
she
but
pushed,
just make it bigger.
She really
yeah,
sort of,
kind of amazing.
not pushed us, but gently, kind of like led us along.
Yeah, like
and,
now
and it was great,
really
and that
like,
support,
pushing the
Thank
ambition to the max, which is
well, thank
amazing.
you. And for me, what that's about too is really being able to the pleasure of watching an artist pull all these things out of themselves, which goes back to really, I think, what we're all doing here today is the sense of the extraordinary imagination of artists, and that they will always go out on a limb if you give them the chance. I mean, it's almost as though the very nature of being an artist is to actually have this creativity beyond ever being comfortable. And I think that's sort of the pleasure and terror of waking up every day as an artist and thinking, you know, what am I going to do today, and make the world believe that what I do is important and is maybe going to change their lives. So the pleasure of working with artists like that is really what drives the whole commissioning idea, and to see these magical works. So thank you very much to John and Mika, and thank you everybody for being here.